Now I'd like to introduce to you a Plenary Dialogue, which is called Building Global Bridges Through Visionary Corporate Leadership. This is moderated by Ambassador John Roos, partner at Geodesic Capital and the former U.S. Ambassador to Japan. The speaker is Mr. Kazuo Hirai, Senior Advisor at Sony Corporation. Mr. Hirai is the former President and CEO of Sony Corporation, and along with Mr. Roos, who has had decades of experience in Silicon Valley, will discuss what it means to be a global leader. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Roos and Mr. Hirai.
Well, thank you. And Kaz, I know you're off to Japan literally right after this session.
Right after this, yes. But
I really appreciate
it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the U.S.-Japan Council for having me this morning.
Thank you for being here and for all your leadership. Let me just take a point of personal privilege. When we started the Tomodachi Initiative at the U.S. Embassy, a group of us, we were looking for a private sector partner. And there was no bolder leader with bolder ideas than Irene Hirano Inoue and the U.S.-Japan Council. So it gives us great joy to see how far the Tomodachi Initiative has come under the leadership of Irene. So can we all give her a big round of applause? So now on to another great leader in a short 23 minutes and 55 seconds that we have been allotted here. You know, Kazuo Hirai-san became the CEO of Sony Corporation in June of 2012 when Sony had experienced record losses. By the time he left, a couple of months ago, and he stepped down as CEO about a year ago, Sony, this past quarter, had achieved record profits. So through his incredibly bold leadership, he was able to, with the help of great many, turn around an iconic Japanese corporation. And you know, I had the honor of joining the board in 2014. And I did my diligence before joining the board, and quite frankly, everyone told me Sony was the past. I should go with a company that was the future. But I sat down with Kaz and had a conversation with him and appreciated the incredible vision and talent that he was bringing to the table, along with his pretty amazing team. And in a very short amount of time, this leader really brought Sony to a whole new level. So I want to start by just asking you how you did it. I mean, one thing—
Go through 6 years and 22 minutes.
One thing I'm a little bothered by, I've been on the board since 2014, and somehow no one gives me any credit for the turnaround.
John deserves a lot of credit.
Because Hirai-san comes from a background that he wasn't an engineer. He didn't have an electronics background. He came from the entertainment side of the business. He was born in Tokyo, but went to the American School in Japan, the SIJ. He spent time in New York, in California, in Canada, so he was multicultural. And I think this background really helped in your leadership of Sony. So I'd like to just kick this off by saying, how did you take your background and put it all together, particularly the multicultural element, to lead Sony?
Well, I think I can address that from two different factors. One is the multicultural aspect that John just mentioned. And I think that certainly, unlike the education that I received in the limited time that I attended Japanese elementary school, in the U.S., even when I was in first grade, second grade, you had to make current events presentations. There were a lot of discussions on current events, even at that level, which never happened in schools in Japan. And so I think I learned at an early age that discussion and dialogue and debate is actually a good thing. And you can agree to disagree, so long as we respect each other. And that was something that was ingrained in me when I was, again, in elementary school in New York. And I think that's helped me a lot, as well as being able to openly express my thoughts and feelings. So not sugarcoating an issue. If the business is not looking good, let's talk about the elephant in the room and say, this business is not strategic, it's not making money, we need to do something about it as opposed to sweeping it under the rug. So that's the multicultural aspect. And the other thing that I think helped me in managing the corporation was the fact that I was an outsider within Sony, because I was 10 years with the music company, 15 years with PlayStation. So even though I was in Sony, I was at a different part of Sony. So when I came in to manage Sony Corp, I had an outsider's perspective, and I didn't have a lot of baggage, if you will. I didn't grow up with all these people that joined Sony Corporation. I joined Sony Music. So I was, again, able to make a lot of objective decisions and say, this business is not working. We should do X, Y, and Z about this business. We should exit this, and be honest and objective. So those two things, I guess, gave me the objective perspective that I think Sony needed at the time, because we had to make some hard decisions as to how we were going to survive and grow the company.
So this US-Japan Council is all about bridging the United States and Japan. Sony had to bridge very different cultures in Japan and Hollywood. How'd you do that?
Well, again, two perspectives. One is managing cultures. So, a Japanese company having a studio in the U.S. We also have a music company based in New York. And so that's a cultural gap that we need to manage. But also there's a cultural gap between the businesses that we have. So a lot of people at Sony are engineers or electronics engineers. They know that we have a studio in Culver City that makes motion pictures like Spider-Man, but they've never been to the studio. And so there's a culture gap right there as well. So I had to bridge the gap between Japan and the US, Japan and elsewhere, as well as this cultural gap within the company, because we're in so many different businesses. And I think the best approach, and I think Senator Dodd talked about this as well as some of the other presentations before us, it's all about making sure that there's an interpersonal connection, a relationship between all the employees at Sony. So for example, I made it a mission to make sure that the senior executives at the corporate level on the electronics side, so these are hardcore engineers, but when we had meetings in the US, in Culver City, for example, I had them get on a plane, they came to Culver City and to interact with the executives from the movie side. And at first it was, why do I need to be there? But I think they've come to understand that, they're also a part of Sony, and the Hollywood people understand what the engineers are doing in Tokyo, and so there's a lot more interaction there. And once again, it's that connection and getting on a plane and meeting each other, talking to each other, that really, I think, broke the ice and made sure that we had a cross-cultural relationship, once again, between countries, but also between businesses as well.
So let me ask you this. Japanese corporations, even though, in my opinion, Japan and the United States are probably the two most innovative countries in the world, Japanese corporations get knocked in this day and age for not innovating quick enough, for not taking risks, for not accepting failure, for not learning from failure and moving on. How did you incorporate that culture at Sony? I think you did, but
one of the things that I encouraged, even during the toughest times, financially and fiscally for Sony, was the fact that we needed to continue to innovate. Because once we did come out of the tunnel and became financially stronger, if we didn't invest in R&D and innovation when things were hard, we have nothing to sell and we have no innovation, even though we turn the company around. So what I did was really talk about innovation day in and day out during the toughest times. And also, I recognized a lot of products that were very innovative, but didn't really do a lot in terms of bottom line contributions. So these were not hits, but I applauded the effort and the innovation. And so I gave a lot of awards and recognition to people who had great products that didn't succeed, not because they didn't succeed, but because they had the courage and the willpower to go ahead with an idea. And I think that sort of culture has to come from the top. And it has to come from the very top. It has to be supported by the senior management team, that innovation is allowed. And also, if you innovate, then, and if you fail, that's okay too, because you learn something. It's easy to say that. but I think leaders need to walk the talk, or talk the walk, whichever it is, to make sure that we talk about this all the time, and we encourage that at every corner. So I would ask, at various meetings, so what are you guys doing to innovate? What are you doing today? Well, surprise me. And I would also go to the R&D centers all the time, say, what are you guys working on? To once again, deliver the message that the senior management or the CEO cares about innovation, and he or she will be there to really support them physically and also mentally as well.
What were some of the toughest decisions you had to make?
I would say a couple. One would be any time that we had to restructure, we had to get out of non-strategic or non-core businesses. We had to get out of the vial business, for example. We had to sell off our chemicals business or battery business to Murata. And that means that we have employees that have been with us for 10, 15, 20, 30 years with Sony that now has to move on to a different company. And that's a real cultural and emotional toll, I think, on a lot of the employees. So those were tough decisions to make, but once again, I had to tell myself, if I didn't make those decisions, then the entire ship is going to go down. So those were tough decisions. And I think the other tough decision, maybe we'll talk about this, is the fact that when do you decide to step down? Was another decision that was really tough for me, and I decided to step down after 6 years, after we had the record profits. A lot of people ask me, why'd you do that? You could have stayed on for many, many more years, but that was the other tough decision that I had to make in terms of my own career, but also what it meant for the company and our business.
Well, I will tell you, when you decided to step down and you called me up, my first reaction is, what's going on here? This guy is so young, so successful. This is unheard of. There must be something going on at Sony. As a board member, I had to probe and discovered.
He did probe. He did.
And I discovered he just wanted to step down.
I just wanted to step down.
And I think you stepped down when you were 57 years old.
Yes.
And the average age of a new CEO in Japan, I believe, is 56 years old. So you really stepped down in your prime. Mm-hmm. Was that a difficult decision? It
was a difficult decision, both personally, but also what it meant for the company as well. But in a nutshell, I became CEO back in 2012, and so I've been CEO now for 6 years. And I used to, when I ran the PlayStation business in the United States, I was the president and CEO for about 11, 12 years. And I know for a fact, just for me personally, that if I'm in a leadership position, the same position for too long, then I become on autopilot because nothing phases me anymore. Anything that happens, been there and done that before. And also the management team and the employees, they know how I will react to whatever situation comes my way. And so they're on autopilot as well. So it's certainly not fair for the employees, certainly the shareholders and the consumers, the fans of Sony, to have a company that's being run by a president that's on autopilot, managed by a group of people that are on autopilot as well. And so I wanted to make sure that there's a sense of urgency about, who is this Yoshida, this new guy? What's he going to say? What's he going to do? That sense of urgency, I think, is really important, number one. Number two, very quickly, because I became CEO when I was 51, I think the retirement age for CEOs at Sony, I think, is 65 or 67. So I could have been there for 16 years. And what does that mean? It means that I maybe would have been happy because I'm on top of the world for 15, 16 years. It also means that we're probably going to miss maybe 2 or 3 generations of younger senior management people who are more than capable of managing this great company, but they don't get the opportunity because this guy at the top has been there for 16 years. And that's not fair, once again, to certainly the management team and the employees. Once again, it's not fair to the stakeholders because there's no innovation, there's no new thinking, there's no fresh wind, if you will, as we say in Japanese, that's coming in to manage the company. So for those 2 reasons, I decided, you know what, it's time for me to go and leave the company in the hands of a very capable CEO that's running the company right now, Yoshida-san.
And why do you look so happy since you've stepped down as CEO?
I can't stop smiling. And the fact that it took me 5 minutes to wear this tie this morning, because I haven't worn a tie in I don't know how long, is a good thing. I was smiling when I was wearing this, trying to get this tie on. I got it finally to work.
The biggest preparation we went through for this session was, what should we wear? Do we have to wear a tie? We went back and forth, and finally Laura Abbott said, put on some ties. So.
By the way, one of the things that I did, and I may have probably gone overboard, is because I wanted to bring a sense of casualness, openness to the company. I used to, and this is no joke, I used to show up at CEO office when I didn't have external meetings. I would go there in a pair of jeans, polo shirt tucked out, and just people are like, "Are you going on a business trip today?" No, I'm here just to work for the whole day at the office. And so I wanted to change the culture of the company that way as well. Now, I didn't show up to board meetings, obviously, in my polo shirt, although I wanted to. But once again, that was the kind of everyday message that I wanted to send to the employees as well.
But it was really interesting the way you were able to blend and cross these different cultures. At the board meetings, you would wear a suit. But when the board approved a proposal that Hirai-san would put on the table, he would bow. And the first time I sat in a board meeting, after sitting in thousands of board meetings in the United States, I couldn't believe that a CEO would bow when the board was approving a proposal. And the other board I'm on is Salesforce, and I'm looking forward to the day that Mark Benioff bows to me.
I don't think Mark is going to bow to anything.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but we digress. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, we're living in a really interesting time, the fourth industrial revolution, as many call it. You have AI, you have cloud computing, you have IoT, big data, blockchain, robotics. Things are changing so rapidly. Obviously, Sony, and you as a leader of Sony, had to confront that on a daily basis. How did you deal with that?
I think some of the things that you just mentioned, AI, IoT, blockchain, data-driven marketing, all of those are very important aspects that 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, it was conceptual. But especially during the latter half of my tenure, those things were an integral part of the strategy for all of our businesses, including our entertainment businesses, our financial services in Japan, and certainly PlayStation and our electronics business as well. I'll just give you an example. For example, data-driven marketing. At Sony Music, literally the day we launch a particular song, we know how high on the charts that particular song will go based on some of the initial data that we get from our music distribution partners. And we use that data to basically make investments to decide whether we want this song to go to the top 10 or we're going to be okay with top 15, what have you, and market accordingly. We do that with our movie business as well, where even before we launch a movie, we know pretty much where things are going to stand with a particular movie based on the data that we get even before we launch. We use blockchain, for example, to calculate and also distribute our royalties to our music publishing writers, for example. And certainly all of our electronics products are all IoT products because there's literally no product in Sony's product lineup except for maybe transistor radios that are not, they're all internet enabled. They are all part of an IoT chain that we have. So I think that none of our businesses have come untouched by this kind of fourth industrial revolution key points that we just talked about.
And where do you see the future headed for Sony?
I think that one of the most important things is certainly to make sure that we innovate and incorporate those things into our businesses, but at the same time, because, for example, IoT means that there's a lot of image sensors and other sensing technologies that need to go into not just Sony products, but products around the world. And we have we have #1 market share actually in image sensors, and we are in the business of manufacturing other sensors as well. Being able to take advantage of that industrial revolution in terms of our product lineup on the B2B side is also a very important aspect of our business. And I think that also is going to fundamentally help drive and grow our sensor business as well.
One thing that I just want to touch on, we don't have a lot of time, is Japan and the United States, I've always been impressed how we learn from each other. And in the area of corporate and corporate governance, Japan traditionally had management-led board of directors. And Sony is one of the leaders in what I would say learning from the United States and bringing in independent directors from the outside, including from the United States and other areas, the UK now, outside of Japan. Interestingly, a phenomenon that's taking place now is Sony and Japanese corporations have always looked to the best interests of stakeholders, not just shareholders. So that means shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers. And now in the United States, the Business Roundtable just came out with a letter that said it's time for the United States corporations to shift to not just looking after the interests of shareholders, but all of stakeholders, including employees. I wonder if you could comment on that, because I think it's really interesting the way the US is now shifting in much more of a direction of where Japan has been for a long time, and Japan shifting with regard to directorships and board to where the United States has been.
Right. I think the most important thing is to make sure the board members actually bow when the resolutions are approved. That'd be the first
We'll
step.
work on that.
But beyond that,
We got a long ways to go.
I do think that making sure that all stakeholders, as you said, involved in the business, and I think we can make a win-win situation. I think we did a pretty good job at Sony doing that, and making sure that we have a board that is very independent of the operating management team is also very important as well. And so the board members at Sony, they are not there to make operational decisions. They're only there to approve of very high-end acquisitions and other strategies and oversight of the management team, as opposed to the boards with a lot of Japanese companies where the boards actually make business decisions. And I think the fact that they're independent at Sony is a very good thing, keeps us honest, and the board members are able to actually drill down on any topic, without regard to actual impact or being concerned about how it's going to impact the business, because that's for us to worry about. And I think that trend is also becoming very strong in Japan. I think it's a very good thing. The more diversified the board is, obviously you all know this, the better off we all are. And I think, once again, the board also needs to be very independent of the operations of the company.
Let me pivot a little bit. So the U.S.-Japan Council, we have, I think, a fair amount of young people in the audience today. And the U.S.-Japan Council is focusing a lot through Tomodachi and other programs on nurturing young people and the relationship and helping to build the bridge or strengthen the bridge between Japan and the United States. Do you have any advice for young people who want to be part of that effort, those in the audience today, in building that bridge between our two countries?
I do, but I think perhaps the young people in this room, by virtue of the fact that you're here, know this already. But you talked about the fourth industrial revolution, IoT, AI, all those good things. And especially because in this day and age, you really don't have to get out of your seat and go anywhere to experience a lot of things. So you can look at your smartphone, you can look at your tablets, go on the internet, whatever it is, and virtually, vicariously experience a lot of different things. And you almost get to the point where you feel like you've been there already, or you've eaten at that restaurant, or you've met somebody, because there's so much information out there. But that doesn't really replace an actual interaction face-to-face with another human being. So especially the younger generation, because they're so used to getting information through technology, they feel like, once again, they've experienced something or they know somebody when they really don't. And so one of the things that I give advice to the younger folks is really get out of your seat, get on a plane, get on a train, go down the stairs, get in the elevator, and go see people in the office, outside the country. Because at least when I joined Sony Music back in '84, there was no smartphone, and basically I had to ask my boss, and he had to give me approval to call New York on an international line because it cost much, right? And so basically, there's obviously no email, so if I had to meet somebody or discuss something with somebody, I would actually, if they're in the same building, get on the elevator, go see the person, introduce myself, and market myself to them, understand who these people are, and make that personal relationship. And that happens within the company, within the office, but also between Japan and the US as well. So once again, don't rely on technology to replace or do something that you fundamentally need to do, and that is get out of your seat and go meet people.
What do you think? What do you think the greatest challenge is for the next generation?
I think one of the challenges, perhaps not for the people in this room, but for the younger generation, I think I've heard a lot of other people speak about this as well, is that once again, because technology and the world is moving so quickly, and not just technology, but other areas as well, that a lot of the kids, the education that they're getting today doesn't really prepare them for for what's out there as they become global citizens, or as they come out of college to look for opportunities. And I think it's incumbent upon certainly the folks like myself, the people in this room, companies like Sony, for example, to make sure that we get that message out there to policymakers, especially people who have impact on kids' education, that they first need to realize that the education that they're getting perhaps may not prepare them well for what's coming. So I think that's a huge challenge, and it's probably a challenge that's accelerating perhaps even quicker than ever before. And we need to really accept that and make sure that, that we're trying everything we can to make sure that the kids are prepared as they come out of school.
So you've dodged this question when I asked you one-on-one, so I'm going to ask in front of 700 people. What's next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? So I've been telling everybody, and I think I've kept my promise, that as I was leaving Sony, that I wasn't going to certainly join another company or board. And I told my employees that you're not going to see a press conference by company X saying I just became their CEO or what have you. And I've kept that promise because I think that I've been very blessed in my career at Sony. I was able to basically be a part of the music company, PlayStation. I got involved with Sony Pictures for about 6 months a couple of years ago as we were going through management changes, and I certainly had the opportunity to manage one of the greatest companies in the world. And so I think I've basically done what I wanted to do in my life as a business person. So I want to distance myself from the business world and try to give back to society in terms of, and kind of exactly to your question, there are a lot of underprivileged kids both here in the US and in Japan, education-wise, welfare-wise, and I want to see if I can make a very small contribution to make sure that we right some of the wrongs that are out there that unfortunately are negatively impacting kids. I can't change the world, and I can't help every child, even in Japan and the US, and certainly otherwise. But I want to at least make a small contribution in that perspective, from that perspective.
One final question. As a leader in Japan, can you get me tickets to the Olympics?
Absolutely.
I want to thank you.
Absolutely.
That question applies to everyone in this room.
All right, okay, all right. You heard it, you heard it right here. John needs tickets to the Olympics.
I do want, Hirai-san, I want to thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
You're a great friend, and we really so much appreciate you taking your time and providing your wisdom here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.